So welcome back. I cannot see because of the light here. So we are now ready to move to our next session, which is going to be a panel. The focus of our discussion during the panel is going to be the scientific challenges, preclinical, clinical, and manufacturing. This is not all the problems, but those are some of the problems we have identified within the ATMP, as described by Pierre earlier. If you are interested about the commercial and the incentive and issues, so you have to wait a little bit because that's going to be discussed this afternoon. What is the process after you have done your clinical trials on what's the value of, and that's something that's going to be discussed later on. But to start with the panel discussion, what I would like to do is give an opportunity to all the panelists to introduce themselves. And after they have introduced themselves, I'm asking them a question, so they'll have to answer to the question, why are we here today? I hope that every one of you knows why we are here today. We are in the right room. It's the ATMP. It's not just a workshop to talk about the problem with ATMPs and the opportunities for ATMPs. We would like really to have some opportunities to do something significant. So that's the purpose of the panel now and the discussion with all of you. What can we do and how IMI specifically could contribute to some of the problems with developing ATMPs? And it's not developing for a company like mine or for academics. It's to get access for patients to those products. This is really the goal, okay? And we don't need to introduce Anna Fischer, but we will start with you, Mimoun Azouz. Who are you? Where are you coming from? And answer to the question, please. Thank you. It's okay.
Thanks, Salahatin. So I am Mimoun Azouz. I am professor of translational neuroscience at the University of Sheffield. So my research focus, or in my team, is mainly gene therapy for diseases of the nervous system, the central nervous system. We developed gene therapy strategies for mainly motor neuron disease, ALS, spinal muscular atrophy, and other disorders of the motor system. And the team is using, in particular, focusing on vector systems like AAV, which are very, very attractive for these applications.
And what do you expect from IMI?
Okay, so in terms of what I expect from today, I am hoping from this workshop, which is a follow-up from the last year, is to discuss and identify the key challenges and mainly identify 2 or 3 priorities for to take forward and to help us move fast in terms of clinical applications of these ITMs, but also thinking about the best way to take them to the market, not only for proof of concept, but thinking really far and thinking about taking the products to the market.
Thank you. We'll come back to you later. Maybe we move on to Georg. So,
it was a surprise. I thought there's one in the rows, but
yeah.
that's okay. You need to be flexible here. So my name is Georg Terstappen. I'm working at AbbVie in Germany, and I'm involved in neuroscience as a therapeutic area there. I'm also co-sharing together with Saladin, actually the Innomit Priority Working Group. And in neuroscience at present as a company, we are not really developing ATMPs, but that could change. And one reason why I'm here and was also involved in the workshop previously is because we basically keep a very close watching brief in this area. So when we think there's a good opportunity for us, we would definitely consider ATMPs as well. And as I said, I'm speaking mainly for the therapeutic area of neurosciences, which on our side basically means Alzheimer's disease and multiple sclerosis. So when I was reading basically through the feedback from the, let's say, concept papers that were mentioned before, And I think here are scientific experts in the room who will address this later on. Otherwise, I was actually thinking that the hospital exemption is something that I would like to discuss here a little bit further and get really also basically feedback from the audience. Because as you know, experimental therapies in the context of ATMPs, they can be tested on human subjects with a hospital exemption in hospitals on individuals. So these are products then which have no marketing authorization yet. And of course, there are pros and cons associated with it. But when I was also basically involved in the previous workshop, I was thinking that something that was mentioned before, and it's really basically also feedback from the various stakeholders, actually also from an EMA consultation that took place earlier this year, that it would really be very important to find out what is the baseline here, what is the benchmark, and try to do some archaeology, let's say, on what has been done already. So what therapies have been basically treated, what worked, what has not worked, and so forth, in order to have a certain benchmark and better awareness about what we have already. And of the 2,800 or so clinical trials that have been carried out to date, 85%, and I think it was on Pierre's slide, actually, they are carried out academy-led. So I think it would be really very good if you could better understand, let's say in a database or whatsoever, what has been accomplished already. And the other thing that is also very important is forward-looking now quality databases, quality registries that Alain also mentioned already, and how we basically could get there. That, I think, would be very important, and I would really be very much interested in getting your opinions on this and whether IMI as a platform could help in this regard. The second, if I can briefly add this as well, that came to my mind in this regard was something that was also mentioned before, also stakeholder feedback from the concept papers, and that's to do with training and education in this area to really basically make people better aware about what it really means to develop an ATMP. And my question there would then also be for the discussion later on, and that is where I will be closing here now. Could a public-private partnership, could an IMI project also help in this area?
Thank you, Georg. So we're moving now to Wilfried. So who are you?
Yeah. Hello, my name is Wilfried Dalemans. So I'm the CTO of Digenix, a Belgian-Spanish company. We are a real SME, and we are deeply involved in ATMP development. We are more than 10 years working on ATMP, so developing them as real medicinal products. And we have had the first approved ATMP in Europe, Chondro Select, which is an autologous chondrocyte preparation. We are now at the regulatory authorities with our second product, which is CX601 for treatment of fistulas in Crohn's patients. So I'm mentioning these two examples just to show that from an SME perspective, from product development perspective, even bringing it to the market, ATMPs have already shown that it is possible. So we're not at the beginning. This, of course, being said, we have heard it in the consultation. We see it every day. It is really not an easy business. It is new type of products with a lot of technical challenges, manufacturing challenges, reimbursement challenges, but it is possible. So we are really focused on the cell therapy business, and I acknowledge there are the two other ones, which is the gene therapy and also the tissue engineering. So we cover, let's say, as ATMP, a very broad sector. But looking from inside ATMP development and bringing it to the market, bringing it to the patients, I think we face today two big hurdles. One hurdle, and that's why I think it's interesting and also important to share this with initiatives like IMI, is the manufacturing. There are two aspects in the manufacturing which are important, and for everyone who has been doing cell culture knows what it is to do cell culture in the lab, but bringing cell culture to a level of industrialization is another challenge. The types of GMP equipment you need, and we're talking about billions of cells. We're not talking about a small cell dish to produce this time. So manufacturing technologies are really a challenge. And for example, all the experience which has been built in the larger industry for monoclonal antibody development, where bioreactors are used and large-scale culture is being developed, are interesting developments for SMEs. The other point which is related to manufacturing is the cost of goods. So the cost to make a dose of such a product is high. And as we all know, with the budgets of the health authorities, it is really a challenge to pay for these high-priced products, which brings me to the second point, which is a challenge for all the ATMP companies, is the HTA. It's how will people look to these products which can have very high prices? How do we define the benefit for the patient at the long term? How do we build it into our clinical trials, etc.? These are other points where the public sector interaction at the level of the IMI could be very important from a point of view of an ATMP developer.
Great, thank you. We'll come back to those points. And our last panelist, Michael, who are you?
Good morning. So my name is Michael Hudacek. I'm a physician by training, so I see patients in hematology and oncology, and my area of interest is T-cell engineering, tumor immunology, so the use of tumor-specific T-cells to treat cancer. I've been working in the US at a major cancer center in Seattle for many years, and I've seen the therapeutic and curative potential of these new immunotherapies. And I've came back to Germany like 4 years ago, and I've built a research lab that is now focused on developing new CAR technologies, new technologies for these tumor-specific T cells. So in the panel here, I'm kind of representing academia, but also kind of the bridge to SMEs and biotech, because many of the technologies that we're developing in the lab are or constitute intellectual property that needs to be protected, and that is of interest for the industry to then bring these ATMPs to the market. So what I think what IMI can do for us is, I do see the ideas that come from academia. I also see that in order to transform these ideas and novel therapies into treatments that reach really large and significant numbers of patients, we do need the liaison with industry, their infrastructure, their capability of providing essential ingredients to make these cell products, for example. So on three brief examples, in preclinical research, for example, I think there needs an area that we need to work on is standardizing our models to test safety and efficacy. I think we in academia have the ideas of how to do this, but often we lack the infrastructure and the resources to really do this in a standardized and, let's say, professional, meaning GLP conform way. For clinical production, I think, or for clinical use of these ATMPs, I think we also need to lead a discussion of how novel ideas and how to conduct clinical trials can emerge, as a lot of the conventional principles of phase 1, 2, 3 development do not apply to these cell products, because an example of our T cells, if you do a phase 1 study looking at safety, it's always also an efficacy test, which is typically done in phase 2, because these T cells, they divide in the patient and they persist for a long time. So new models need to be developed here in conjunction with industry. The last example is manufacturing. There's probably two ways of making these ATMPs, either in big cell factories where you ship products from the hospital to the cell factory and receive your product back, or kind of the point of care model where we develop models of producing the ATMP actually at the point of care in the hospital. An example of our CAR T cells, this would be the preferred way, but this also needs the input from industry to make these automated cell production robots, or whatever you want to call them, happen. So these are some things where I think IMI can help and where things can be moved forward in a partnership between academia and industry.
Great, thank you, Michael. So now that we have introduced all the panelists, what I would suggest is start to get a kind of a conversation. I'm going to ask some questions, but I would like also to have the group you engaged in the content conversation. So if you have any questions, just wave your hands and there will be microphones available. I'll start now. We're going back to you, Anna. So with your experience in hematopoietic stem cells and all the work in the immunology, you have been collaborating with everyone who is competent in the world to help you do the work, right? So scientifically. So the collaboration between academics is something that is just institutionalized forever. Now that's the principle of, so that works. The collaboration between the private and the public is something that has started to happen at different speed in different countries, right? Probably faster in the US, and it's coming now in Europe. and some countries still have that problem of culture. You know, how do you get engaged with the industry? So what we have tried to do within the IMI is to really break those cultural barriers and have a neutral broker where you can discuss and you have a problem. The problem is the same for everyone, and we try to resolve it together. So how would you use it today? So where are the areas for you of interest where you can make a big difference in your field or in another field if you have any other suggestions? But we are in the ATMPs, of course.
I will try to stick to my field because I'm not sure I can make too many extrapolation. So considering ex vivo modification of cells by gene transfer and cell culture, because both are tightly associated. At this stage, I think obviously any worthwhile project need to be one day or another taken over by industry, and I think we have to collaborate as early as possible. Practically speaking, so viewed from the academic side, we have research labs, we have the hospital, and we need to have, this has just been discussed, we need to have in situ GMP facility to develop proof of concept studies. And this is for the academic system, it's very tough to maintain such GMP facilities because they are extremely expensive. We are not used to work with such facilities. We need to recruit the right people and so on and so on. So it seems to me that this is a key place because this is the place where the clinical protocols are being developed, structured, once they're hopefully automated. So I think one good way to go ahead, it seems to me, would be to develop private-public partnership within such structures located in a few university hospitals. There can't be too many, but where there is research, academic research, and there is the possibility to develop together with one or why not several private partners the tool that is the GMP lab to develop the clinical protocols. I think that will be one way. This is not a single way, that's for sure, but I think that way, at least viewed from the academic side, would be a way to improve and facilitate the development of projects, both projects coming from the academy, and we have seen that most of them still today are coming from the academic world, but also new ones coming from new tools and ideas that have been developed within industry. So I think this is a way, a kind of core local facility for proof of concept studies performed together.
Thank you. I'd like to invite the audience now. Is there anyone who would like to react to that? To disagree or to agree? Or Carol, and then we'll get to you.
Migliaccio from Beatrice. First, some background. I am a person culture primary cells. I am a regulator. I am a clinical trial authorization person. So my point of view is a little bit mixed. I agree with Professor Fischer that we need much less fragmentation in the production unit because there is increasing cost with the small production unit toward a very large one. A large one centralized can do it much cheaper, avoid the expenses, reducing the cost, making it faster. The idea to have it in academic framework is dangerous because academics do not understand GMP and regulation. And that takes me back to the need for training. If you need to produce in an industrial way, in a consistent way, you need to have trained people. Otherwise, they do mistake. And it's reflected on the fact that these products stays in academia, don't move to the marketing authorization fast enough for their patent to be valid. So at the end, there is no value for industry to be developed. This has to change. And this is areas where a cooperation between industry and academia can go very long way. So you see, I was critical, so I'm happy to hear from you.
Thank you for your answer. And Anna, you wanted to say something?
For training, that's for sure. We need a lot of people to be trained to work in such centers. I don't think there is a contradiction to have a limited, I don't know exactly what I mean by limited, I have to admit, but a limited number of GMP facilities within university hospitals where research is strong, and the organization of centralized facilities owned by the industry for further development of studies. Because I think the first one, the one located within university hospitals, to my opinion, should be devoted to proof of concept studies. And then when one moves from a proof of concept studies to something which has been considered as being of interest, then I think it can move to industry and have centralized facility for cell preparations, gene transfer, and so on. So my opinion would be to combine both as much as we can.
Okay, thank you. I think there are a lot of people who wanted to react, so maybe we give a chance to Carol to say something, and then Michael will come to you. You have to shout, Carol.
I'll try not to shout too much. Carol Longson from the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence in England, but my question is in relation to my role in the Scientific Committee of IMI. And trying to bridge perhaps two of the comments that have come across already. It was really interesting to hear that we have perhaps either a difference of view or a difference of perspective about how interested industry is in getting into this area. But we also have some really important fundamental, both scientific and develop R&D challenges to push the field further. And so what I'm intrigued to understand, and maybe this is a question for your panelists who are from industry, is what you can do in the R&D space to foster the innovation that is needed in academia and in the healthcare system to allow you to be in the best position to pick up products when they emerge.
Maybe I can first react also to the comment that was made from the audience. And I should probably say that I do not agree with the statement that academia has no expertise for GMP. I mean, I think particularly in the ATMP field, the key expertise is in academia. We know how to produce these cell products. We also know how to bring them to the patient. I think what the liaison with industry can do is you can help us to get access to all the reagents that we need in a specific quality. You can help us with your resources to equip the GMP laboratories that are present at many of the academic institutions already appropriately with infrastructure and personnel to move a product forward into early phase clinical testing. And what industry can in that process learn is how they can then adopt that GMP compliant manufacturing process to a large scale production when you go into later phase clinical testing or when you market your cell product. I think that's also the experience in our field, particular T-cell engineering CAR-T. I know exactly how to produce a CAR T-cell product in clinical quality. And that expertise, with all due respect, is not present in the industry. But this is part of the interaction between academia and industry that IMI is about, that we learn together or exchange knowledge, and that the industry is then capable of actually bringing the cell products to a large patient community and to the market.
Thank you. I just wanted to, from the industry side, because there was a question, what is it from the industry that you would expect from the academia to advance, or would that, just to make sure that I get the question from Carol.
So I'm picking up on the comment about we're not involved in this area, but my feedback to you is yes, you are, and yes, you can be. Yes, you are, because you're interested in R&D, and this is one of the most exciting places for R&D in life sciences. So I would imagine that even if it's not from the commercial side at this point, just from the scientific discovery side, you're interested and active. And yes, you can. There are huge amounts of knowledge exchange that can happen in these types of private-public partnerships. And who knows what that will lead to, and that's the whole emphasis, perhaps, of the R&D initiative within companies, is that sometimes you have to explore in order to be able to capitalize downstream on those prospects.
Go ahead,
so maybe a challenge for you. Perhaps.
Yeah, so if I can take this, perhaps, because you looked at me, perhaps addressing someone from an industry. Yeah, the others, of course. No, that's perfectly fine. I mean, of course, different companies look at the same thing in a different manner. It depends on your overall company strategy. And I was basically referring to that we, in the neuroscience therapeutic area, are currently not actively developing these products. I was also saying that we keep a very active, close watching brief on the space. And as a matter of fact, If we could, let's say, well, attrition, drug discovery, and so forth, we all know this is really an issue. And if you go to complex therapeutic modalities, the issue is perhaps even bigger than that. But if we could de-risk basically our engagement in this area, for instance, through an IMI project, and that's what we are discussing here, I could very well assume that we would get involved with it. So it's not that we basically do not follow what is going on and could not think that we get involved in some exploratory activities, but we would have to find the appropriate way. And that might be different from other companies. You know, we heard GSK had a product already which was basically authorized for marketing this year, and so that's a very good example. And other companies are basically perhaps also preclinically or clinically developing these products. And so it really depends also from the overall company strategy. But we definitely consider it, but we would need to find the right way to get into it. And, you know, from a neuroscience area perspective now, just because this is my field, of course, we understood from Alain this morning that the added complexity here is the blood-brain barrier. And clearly there's an extra hurdle, but also there, you know, if a good opportunity came along, the right instrument to de-risk it, definitely would be willing and actually love to be involved with this. And that's why we're discussing that in the PPP, public-private partnership, IMI space here.
Okay. Thank you, Georg. So maybe, Mimul, I will give my opinion, but not as a chair of the panel, but later. Okay, Mimul.
Okay, so I want just to follow up on the manufacturing issues, and also the fact that most of the products, mainly I talk about gene therapy, are the products, most of the products are developed in academic setup. So this is actually in itself an issue, and I would, in my view, this is the right time to engage with pharma companies, because there is a huge interest in gene and cell therapy. And if you look at companies like GSK, Pfizer, etc., they are developing a huge platforms in this area. The reason is, in my view, is that the products that are developed in academia, they are great until proof of concept, the first proof of concept. And then the problems start after that. And the ideal situation is that we need to have a hub for manufacturing where everything is done from, you know, once we have a discovery from the bench, taking it all the way to marketing. The reason is because when we manufacture a product for phase 1, proof of concept in man, then that can work very nicely. After that, we realize that, for example, the producer cell line we use, we cannot take it any further. The scale-up process can change, and then that will bring us back 2 steps back, actually, not progress, because we have to restart the process, produce the virus, and we may go back and do bridge studies, etc. That is why really we have sometimes significant delays in the process. So if we imagine a hub where everything is set up from cell production cells, releasing tests, QC, etc., and where the product can be taken all the way to the market, that will be very, very helpful for gene and cell therapy.
Okay. Can I just ask real quick, I mean, how do you imagine this hub to look like? Is this a big centralized thing?
Well,
or otherwise, because, let me just add, would such a hub not be actually an obstacle, because you have to transfer all that knowledge that is already at the academic institution then into that hub? And with such a transfer, of course, certain details get lost. You have a loss of quality. Or would it not be better in IMI to have that hub just as an overarching structure, but that would then actually promote the interaction at the specific site where the cell product is developed?
I mean, I can see it happen with better coordination. The problem at the moment is that we have, for example, small facilities that work separately. I mean, independently from other facilities, and that is a problem. If there is a coordination and involving also pharma companies, this coordination and work in collaboration can lead to at least the first step, at least some groups, pharma companies working together to make it happen.
There's one question in the back, so somebody, he's very far, but he wants to react. Stand up.
Yeah, okay. My name is Kaio Kallen. I'm the CMO of a Belgian biotech, Eterna, founded for vaccination or immunization against cancer with mRNA. But we also have a dendritic cell activity and inherited that from the co-founder, Chris Sielemans, from the VUB. And basically, I think our problem is a bit what the two gentlemen just discussed. I mean, Chris and Bart Naines from the VUB achieved proof of concept data in melanoma in 2 different clinical settings, really convincing data. And yet, I mean, the interest from venture capital, from big pharma is just very lukewarm, because precisely what was just discussed, it's totally unclear to everybody in the field how that therapy can be made widely available. The question is not that some professor or some academic research can't do it at the university. The problem is to make it widely available to patients, to probably very many patients, not just niche indications. And I think it's extremely difficult to get funding to advance that, either from the private or from the public space. And I think really IME, with its setup, I mean, would be ideally suited from my perspective to support such things, because it's also totally unclear what is best to do, either a central hub where everything has to pass through, or to do it in a more diverse way, where you develop a process that can be transferred then, say, to certain centers of expertise, but certainly far more than one. And that's totally unclear, and there's absolutely no funding to solve the issues associated with that. And that touches down on manufacturing processes, spec definitions, etc. Those are extremely costly exercises, and there's really very hard to get the money to do that work.
Maybe two comments. One comment is to Carol from the input from really academia. I think, and I'm talking now for cell therapy, but Professor Fischer has also mentioned it, we are still at a very early stage of development of this product. So long-term safety is one of the things. Stem cells, we all know the hype about stem cells, but there is still a lot to be done, and it's for sure we will build on academics, we will build on research to improve our first ideas. We are at the onset of the technology, a bit like the monoclonal antibodies, and we need this long way to go, though. So I think there's definitely a role on this interaction. Then coming to the hub, first of all, I don't agree with the statement that we don't know how we have to make GMP and so on. I think it's maybe an overstatement, but you're talking about the hub. I think let's look to reality. Where are the proof of concepts done? Where is the science generated? It's in the academic and clinical centers, that's for sure. Where is today, and I'm talking about cell therapy development, real development with GMP, but it's not only GMP, it's regulatory development, phase 2, preclinical trials, toxicity, etc., etc. Where is it mostly done? In the biotech industry, SMEs. You look around, it are SMEs who are driving it, because at this time, Big Pharma has not yet the full appetite, because it's still not clear on the commercial possibilities. So this is a third party where we rely maybe on for the later phases, where you really want to go on the market, where commercialization, sales networks become important. So I see all these 3 things will play a role. And the hub today, I don't think you need, well, you can create a hub, but the hub principle is already there in the biotech industry, because we develop these products from the proof of concept to phase 3 and to regulatory approval. For cell therapy, no, I agree, but I give you an example. That's why I say also we're quite at the onset of it. So we certain things will take more time, certain things will be at an earlier stage. So, but I think all these things are into place, and we just need to make sure that they're well aligned and somewhere fostered through initiatives like, for example, the IMI.
Okay, Michael.
So no offense with saying that the industry has no idea of how to make a GMP product. But I think, I mean, there's probably academia, biotech, and big industry. And probably the experience with ATMPs in big industry is probably less or not very, not a lot at this point. Maybe one thing about the hub, I think the idea of structuring it and organizing it is good. What I would like to point out maybe also is that actually the availability of GMP space, in particular at academia, is actually quite significant. But actually often it is underused because maintaining the GMP facility and staffing a GMP facility is quite expensive, and the universities often do not put a lot of resource into these facilities. So this would actually be a perfect setting for the interaction between academia, biotech industry, maybe also big industry, just to sophisticate that infrastructure, staff these facilities, and that would be a way to make progress actually really fast, because they don't need to build new GMP facilities. They're already there. They just need to be used, right?
You want to?
First of all, I agree fully with you. Just mentioned that this is really one place. I don't want to reiterate what I said, but one place where we can really interact in a very proper way at the level of this GMP lab within university centers. But I would like to add one other aspect. It is there are not only two partners, the public and the private. There is a third one, at least from time to time. We have it in France. I'm sure this may also be developed in other countries. These are entities developed by patients' associations. In France, we have AFM Téléthon. They have developed the so-called Geneton, which is a GMP lab where they produce clinically approved vectors for gene therapy. We are collaborating with them. And they are also developing now entities for a GMP entity for stem cell therapy. So they are also partners. We should not forget them, and we should include them, I think, in such common partnerships. So there are 3 partners instead of 2. And the patient, by the way, they are also representing patients, so they are bringing one added value, which is their contribution to the design of studies, what the patients are expecting from new clinical trials. And I think this is important in terms of designing trials, designing the parameters of assessment of clinical outcome, and how to organize also the follow-up of patients.
So before you react, I just want to say this is a very good point. And thinking about the Geneton and what Geneton has contributed scientifically to the community, it's quite impressive in terms of the new genes that have been identified, potentially new targets for diseases, etc. This has helped a lot the pharma industry, basically, because we are tapping on that to continue our own activities. So that's an interesting area. I don't think we have connected those, and we may look at those and see what is the next frontier for the Geneton, for example, in terms of increasing the scale, etc. I don't know whether there's anyone representing the Geneton here, probably not, but we will follow up. This will be an action you have to follow up and discuss with them. You are from Geneton?
Martin Hildebrand, representing the Eurotech universities. And I just wanted to make a proposal, a suggestion how we can see how technical development, scientific and clinical development that is naturally occurring and growing and disappearing in certain places might merge into commercialization, into a translational effort that could also pick up on competencies coming from the industry. You mentioned the commercialization point, which is totally lacking in academia, and I'm very much aware of this. And since this is a moving field, it is very difficult to define large hubs that simply would add another party into this field with a certain loss of quality issues. And you may be aware of the fabulous incentive coming from EMA with the PRIME scheme, where EMA lends their competence to certain projects, picking up on those like CAR T cells, and accompanying the process, lending their expertise throughout the entire translational development. And perhaps that is a scheme that could also be taken up by EMI, perhaps even in conjunction with EMA, saying that we lend our commercial and our industry expertise to selected projects or selected clusters, perhaps in association with EMA, and guide them along to avoid mistakes, to avoid things that may reiterate the entire developmental process because it's not GMP upscaling compliant. So perhaps a prime scheme of EMI would be something conceivable in some way that would also very much take into account the knowledge that is in academia, but also lend the industry and the regulatory expertise that comes from EMA into a joint effort, which perhaps a higher probability of success.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We will follow up. I have a question to the gentleman who is behind you, if you can take the microphone. You didn't ask the question, but I'm asking you a question. You are representing the European Commission. What is the perspective from the European Commission in establishing ATMPs as in Europe as a center of excellence or world center of excellence?
You mean now for the infrastructure or
in general?
what?
So how do we make a difference and attract, the investors? Because that's also one point. How do we attract people to do the work in Europe rather than elsewhere?
I think I'm a little bit on the same thinking that my colleague here on the left side. I think, what you have said all over, that's all nice and we all agree with that. And I think it's also our own reflection on that. But when you look at the 8 products you have on ATMP, they all come from academics, and the Commission has supported actually 3 of the latest ones actually quite heavily, especially in gene therapy also. So the reflection is that, but these are products which are really niche products. These are not products which are very interesting for industry. So now with CAR T cells, and we could discuss that maybe a little bit more, because this is an example where you could have maybe more business opportunities and so on and so on. Our one idea would be that that IMI, together with the different other stakeholders, could think about a kind of a pilot project for ATMPs, and just giving the scientific community to select this pilot project, but then go through all the different hurdles or obstacles you have seen here. These are in the preclinical. We have speaking about organoids or whatever, large, small animal models, and we have to go more to the standardization of tests and then the GMPs and then also go even further than in the clinical setting, but then also maybe in the reimbursement issues for HTA and so on. So I think my advice would be, can IMI not tackle from everything from the whole development pipeline, so to say, from the preclinical stage up to actually when the product could be really positioned somewhere. So I think that would be really a gate opener also for probably other people would like to continue. And could you probably the difficult thing would be to choose the right one now. That would be, but that you could leave to. There's a lot of things out there already. So what is to pick up, and that you can pick up by the experts.
So just to, the time, the development time for a product is, but it's not 4 or 5 years, right? It could be very long if you want to start very early on. But rather than having one, you could take several at different stage of the development, and then you can explore a different stage. What are the issues and enable? So the process for selection is something that we have to think about. But having different products, different kind of products at different stage of development, and get through a kind of pilot for each of them, 4 or 5 products. Why not? Good. I think something that we can. Some people are taking some notes, and we can reflect on that. Yes, you want to. You don't agree with that?
No, I completely agree. For once, this time I'm in agreement. I liked very much the last comment and the sentence, de-risking our project. From the point of view of regulators, we have big issues because there is a lack of validated techniques, validated animal model, validated analytical tool, and these are common to all projects. Almost every project uses flow cytometry. We don't have an analytical way to use a flow cytometry. There is nothing validated. Who pays for this kind of studies? Not a research project. H2020 doesn't have money for doing a validation of a technique. I hope that IMI can find a pre-competitive area where can do this kind of validation tools that are then useful for all, both academia and industry, in the development.
Okay. Beatrice, yep.
Thank you. Following the comment now from Giovanni, I would say, well, I'm Beatrice Silva Lima from Scientific Committee of IMI. I have the feeling that you are driving again then into a direction of building a kind of a platform for getting common standards that would allow the concept to progress appropriately towards the patients. I guess that when we look at what is happening with the approved advanced therapies, currently at least in Europe, they are failing in the market, or because they are very expensive, or because the quality aspects really, and the expenses related to the quality aspects really are making them unviable. So, question is whether this, let's say, keeping this situation of diverse sites for production with quality assurance, having to make the expansion and so on, is making more harm than good, because by the end of the day you get stuck with if you don't get stuck at the moment of the marketing authorization, those who didn't get stuck and went through, they are done, actually, in the market almost. So, does it mean that all these aspects in terms of quality assurance, standardization of processes, even for platforms that might be built in terms of different types of cells, different types of gene platforms and so on, would it make sense to have joint efforts? Because what matters later on is the concept itself. And that's the one you will have to test clinically with good quality products that need to be viable when they are produced.
So one way, Beatrice, and then I will give it to Wilfried, would be to continue on that proposal to say, why don't we list not just cytometry aspect, but list all the processes that you have to have validated and ask the academics to tell us, what are the bottlenecks for them and have them validated. Some could be centralized, and you can have your centralization of work being done somewhere. Others could be decentralized, but standards for all the process, cannot be only one. It would be too small. But if you do it in a large scale, and whole process for cell, gene therapies, etc., vector production, you name it, that would be one way to follow up. I'm just trying to make sure that when we take the note, on following up, this is well captured. Wilfried, you wanted to comment on that?
Yeah, because it's right what is said, but I think there are different aspects in that. When I think on this quality assurance, validation, this will benefit the whole field. I think I see it independent of really the next stages, which you mentioned, and we'll come to it directly. This will be beneficial because at the end of the day, we want a quality product which meets the regulatory requirements to get out of it. And the more it's validated and harmonized, everyone will profit from it. So there's definitely a point. Now, to the problem of getting these products, once they're on the market, really viable, commercially viable, I think one aspect is the price, and it's not by centralizing or decentralizing or working on the quality. We have just to admit that growing cells I'm talking again cell therapy, cells is, and especially if you need hundreds of millions, is costing. So we need somewhere to figure this in. I think a real challenge also, especially for small companies, and we have faced this, is that you go for a central approval, you talk to one agency, and then you're back to Europe with 28 HTA agencies where you have to go again one by one for your file. And that's a huge burden. And I'm not saying they should not do it, but that's a huge burden to get it really reimbursed also.
Of course, Carol is going to react to that.
Probably something that I won't cover too much in my afternoon presentation because it's very detailed, but one of the key things that we are finding when we come to look at the advanced therapies that are coming for marketing authorization is, yes, they're costly, but it's about the uncertainty of their benefit relative to that cost that's the issue. It's not just about the cost itself. It's what we have coming to market are those that definitely have proof of concept and definitely have a positive signal. But the magnitude of that signal relative to the costs that they may incur is too uncertain at this point to think about a routine investment. And so one of the things that that we've been exploring, and I think would be quite an interesting thing, perhaps, to think about for IMI, are, in a sense, what sort of post-market de-risking things can be developed that all countries can use. So this gets across the point of it being very diversified in the EU. What sort of de-risking mechanisms can be introduced such that products with promise but uncertainty still have the opportunity of being used in real life, but that is in a way that is minimizing the risk to the healthcare system of investing those resources in an inappropriate way. And I think that that's a really important thing for these types of therapies, because they will absolutely come to market with that promise but uncertainty. And we have to get over that hurdle post-market. Otherwise, there will be a block, and that block will be unfortunate. It's something that we can address upfront, de-risking in the mechanisms of market access. I won't be able to cover that in my presentation because I'm on other things, but it's one of the most important things that perhaps we need to develop thinking for the future.
Yes, thank you, Carol. And this is something that has been identified as the fourth pillar that is an important one. We are not talking about this now, so let's get back to. Yeah, so thank you for the answer.
Some points. First, to the talking about quality control. I think we have to make a differentiation between basic quality control for a lot of different ATMPs, which has already a good level or a high level in SMEs and also on the academic side. And there are also in European Union calls FP7 and also Horizon 2020 work on harmonization in that among the EU. And there's an ongoing process to improve that. But it's absolutely right, we have a bottleneck in quality control in terms of functional assays to validate that. This is something what we should discuss in a new EME project, by example. And the other thing, on the manufacturing side, what to my opinion is important to discuss, we all have more or less something like an overview what is going on in the EU with something like antigen-specific T cells, who is producing that, for which patient we are using that on the cancer as well as on the severe infection disease side. And for CAR T cells, it's a little bit similar. And we also, because of clinical gov, we also know what is going on now for CAR NK cells or other effector cells as well. But there is a totally bottleneck what is going on with good trials, first in men on hospital exemption, individual Heilversuch, and I think we really need something like a platform to exchange mind on that direction to really help what is good for the patient to develop further with good partners on the SME, on the industry, and also on the academic side. And I also hope that we will find a way together, also have minority groups like rare disease in children, that we also will find there a discussion round and how to set up good protocols for ATMPs for those groups and how to find the financial support for that. That is something I would like.
Yeah, that's, I think, really an important point, and reconnecting to something that I said in my introductory statement, that I think we really need to have a database about what was done in the past to be able to build on that, and definitely have quality registries for what is going on right now and what will be developed in the future. And coming back to the question that I raised before, do we think here in the audience that IMI could be a platform for basically doing something in this area? Because typically what you like to do is you want to learn really, especially from the failures of the past, but if you are not really aware of the failures, because this is all distributed over very many, let's say, academic laboratories in Europe and beyond, then you cannot really capitalize on this. So my question would really be, would it be possible to do this archaeology? Would it be possible to basically put a database together? Or are the PIs sitting in the academia perhaps not really open for doing this? And then also quality registries, as Ellen said before, if it's something that we would be able to do and get off the ground quickly, and perhaps based on IMI.
A paediatrician in Liverpool, I can't comment on archaeology, important though it is, but I would emphasize the importance of coming up with protocol templates for all age groups, but particularly for children. We're working with Transcelerate in a global setting to develop protocol libraries, and they have protocol libraries for diabetes in all age groups, and now we're working on a template for pediatrics. And the idea is that you don't specify every detail, but that when someone comes to write a new protocol, they have an element, a library of elements they can use, introductions, adverse event reporting, consent, assent, and all of that can be agreed across multiple conditions, and then the details for each specific condition put in. So if IMI2 is positioned to bring people together from all sectors, starting off with the children, the families, and moving into industry and the regulators and investigators, to build on that kind of effort, to have a library of protocol elements, then I think that would speed things up, but also lead into common operating procedures for conducting clinical trials, all of which needs to be done in common to avoid reinventing the wheel every time a trial is set up. There's a lot of shared wisdom, and maybe IMI2 can be the repository of that shared wisdom and have prospective archaeology.
There's one reaction, maybe we give it to on this one. Yeah, go ahead.
Owen McGrath from the European Society for Blood and Marrow Transplantation. It's not a direct response, it's a comment on registries. And I would just comment that PIs and the clinicians are interested in that data. They've actively produced these registries, or actively are producing them. In the case of the EBMT, I think we have a unique registry, about 500,000 transplants over 40 years. Where we struggle is keeping it maintained, keeping abreast of technology, platforms for databases, user-friendliness, etc. And significantly, we get our data for free. The transplanters invest time, principally, in reporting data on their transplants in the interest of building a critical mass of data that can be used for studies. And particularly in rare diseases where a single center simply won't generate that critical mass. And in fact, to some extent, we see what's happening in the US, where you have a federal-sponsored registry, CIBMTR. You have an obligation for allogeneic transplantation to report. It's a legal obligation. Plus, there is a payment to the center for every patient that is reported. So that just gives you an example of the difference in resources available. So I would say that IMI should look at what EMA is doing around the Patient Registries Initiative. I think that the societies, another example is the European iBank Association or iBank Society. I'm not sure if there's anybody here, but they have successfully received funding from the European Commission under the public health call to combine 3 existing registries. So again, and it was said at the beginning, don't reinvent the wheel, look around and then work with the people who have the experience in this to build a product which is not just one-dimensional. The first person interested in these registries is the clinician and the practitioner, but clearly there's an interest from the other stakeholders as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just as a direct reaction, I absolutely agree, and I think that the existing databases like at the EBMT would be a good platform just to extend, and I think that academic investigators that are using hospital exemption as a way to get their ATMPs to the patient would be very willing to share the data if they feel that it's a transparent and accessible database like at EBMT, where they can give information in and also get high quality information out. Maybe as a follow-up as to what the Ulrike Kür said earlier, efficacy testing for ATMPs, maybe an example of T cells in our case. I do very much agree that there needs to be standardization. Models need to be defined and validated. One thought, and maybe this is also a way we can further develop our discussion, is it was pointed out whether small animal models or large animal models should be used for different applications. I'm being provocative and asking the question, would it not be, or should it not be a focus to actually get away from animal models? Because if they are then proposed to be used at different sites, in different contexts. That's a formidable challenge to get approval, also ethical approval, to apply certain animal models, especially if it's large animal models in non-human primates, for example. Should not the focus be on non-animal models? We mentioned organoids that are quite well advanced. So could it be possible, especially for cancer therapeutics, to develop consensus panels of normal human tissues, of model cancers that are then being used in a standardized way by multiple investigators and stakeholders? That's one thing. And directly in conjunction with this is the issue of GLP.
Maybe we have a pause. Otherwise, is there because it's already interesting. Anyone would like to react to the preclinical testing and so having a setup, getting out of the animal models and moving into organoids? Beatrice, I'm inviting you to say something.
Well, I could agree more. I would say actually the advanced therapies might be seen. I have been working as a regulator previously, and from my previous experience on all these areas, I would say the advanced therapies have very much, following biotech products, been, let's say, in the edge of the possibilities and, let's say, for deviating from animal models, simply because they might not be relevant. When you are talking about rodents, well, rodents treated with human cells, I guess that we are not very comfortable. Rodents treated with rodent cells, it's just a proof of concept, but not more than that. Normally you treat healthy animals, not diseased animals. And for the large animals, I think it's unbearable. You can use many, but you will never use sufficient number. So we get in the preclinical exactly the same problem that we get in the clinical when we are saying we have 1,000 patients to look at. So when the new methodologies, and that's where the risk-based approach is so important, and I would say somehow that's where maybe the platform building would be so important for characterization of as much as possible in terms of biological activity, safety aspects, and so on, that you could then extrapolate and then adjust a little bit, always based on anticipated risks, and then using as much as possible the available alternatives.
Thank you, Beatrice. Because I'm looking at the time now, so what I would like to do is just ask the audience and the panelists, from all the conversation that and the proposals we have heard today, do you think we are going to transform something? I think those are ideas, but I'm just trying to be provocative now and say, is this going to be really game-changing for ATMPs? I'd like again to separate the commercial market access aspect, which is a critical point, but that would be addressed separately. But from the science, preclinical, clinical, manufacturing, what you have heard today, is there anyone who would like to propose something that is going to be, that should make sense, of course, but that has not been proposed, that could be really transformative and that we should really take into account? It's your chance. You have 5 minutes left. No? Maybe you? And I will go back to
one of the key things that we need probably to decide or propose is, should we, in terms of manufacturing, should we support manufacturing in academic setup or in a private setup, or both? And risk assess what are the advantages and disadvantages of each option. The way I see it is that the academic manufacturing at the moment is working okay, but it's not perfect. My experience with working with manufacturing products with academic facilities is somehow not perfect, because institutions, universities decide to drop supporting these facilities and they move them to startup setup. And startup setup is different, so they look after their portfolio and they are not worried about working with other groups to manufacture. So we need just to, in terms of manufacturing, this is a key issue, and we need to come up with the best way forward or the best option to put forward based on our discussion today.
Thank you. So, Carol, you wanted to react? There's one here, and Ian, I will come to you later. Yeah.
I'll try to be short. So we've talked about de-risking things for industry with all of these uncertainties and challenges. Perhaps more free thinking. How about new models of sharing the rewards of success? As this space, it's a really interesting one because where research turns into development is a very interesting point in ATMPs. And I just wonder whether or not new models of private partnership reward-based mechanisms might be an interesting place to go. I don't know if IMI can do it, but it's something that struck me in these areas where it really is quite difficult to stimulate the science to translate into benefits for patients. And
yeah, we will consider that, Carl. I don't know whether, if IMI cannot do it, I don't know who can do it. At least we should try, because we can bring all this, because it's multiple stakeholders who have to be involved here. We bring all the stakeholders around the table and consider that this is something that was emerging from the first workshop we were having. What kind of rewarding, we can create to stimulate. Okay, so there's one question in the back, or suggestion? Yes, thank you.
My name is Kucharczyk. I represent small biotech company from Warsaw in Poland, and taking into consideration our discussion today, that's clearly seen that the GMP facility and analytical tools, there is the point where the academic and small biotech company can stop for a while to pass over this problem. And as usual in the business, this problem is the opportunity for some other people. So I believe that in pretty short time we will have some private GMP facility in Europe. But on the other hand, considering the potential private partnership, public-private partnership, that could be considered also as an investment opportunity for the public money. And not only as how to spend the public money, but how to invest to generate the future revenue and workplaces. And definitely, in my opinion, the analytical tools development, which could facilitate the regulatory work and development of the GMP facility, that could facilitate forward or push forward the number of ATP therapies which are already in academia or small business. This is the barrier right now, which is clearly identified by many people here today, and this is our experience as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah?
Yes, Jan Richter from Novartis. I work in regulatory affairs. I just want to emphasize again the point that one should not underestimate the complexity when you do technology transfer from academia into the commercialization world and drug development world. So there's a lot of interactions with regulators on the CMC front when you upscale, when you develop your critical attributes for the product. And I think one could envision a point of care setting, but it has to mean that then the partners from academia and industry have to move together from the very beginning through the whole journey together with the regulators, because the problem is always when you get something which has proof of concept and then it's technology transferred. Then is when usually the issues come where you have to even repeat clinical studies, you have to do comparability studies, and to avoid this in a point of care setting, if in a properly concerted way, together with regulators and payers, that could probably be a potential for acceleration.
Thank you. Last question from the audience, and then we go for the panel again. Yeah.
Yeah, Lushkin Dana from Viscofam Engineering. If I had to think about an area of work that would really impact the development of ATMPs, I would say probably the manufacturing and the early thinking on how to manufacture the ATMP would be a thing to tackle. No? So I guess many times you find academics and also companies that design an ATMP in a way that is feasible to produce for the proof of concept, and then they have a problem in the scale-up. No? So developing technologies that first facilitate and reduce the cost of scale-up, and then also generating some kind of consultant institution that help academia and also biotech companies in really making ATMPs that are then easy to scale up. This would probably have a meaningful impact in the industry.
Thank you. Okay, from the panel, is there anyone having a provocative idea, suggestion? Yeah.
Coming back to the point that you made about earlier rewards, and I think that's an important thing. In line with that, also, I think it would be of interest to have novel concepts about early reimbursement for these ATMPs, because even in a phase 1 study with, for example, a T-cell product, it's not just about testing safety. At this point, the treatment will already also have efficacy. So in order to encourage this development, and because the cost of establishing the manufacturing, getting approval for a first clinical trial is so high, it would be of interest to also have early reimbursement models for these ATMPs. And I also agree with the statement from Novartis. I think it would be preferable if academia and industry start a co-development quite early on. Then, of course, also what needs to be discussed are issues of intellectual property, how this is being protected early on, how also academia, who's typically in a weaker position in terms of being able to protect it adequately with strong patents, how the needs of academia are then catered for in such a development.
We've heard a huge amount of very important things and so on, and then you really get scared at the end of the day about all the challenges you hear. On the other hand, and just to be very clear, I think each individual approach, being a gene therapy for this or this, is very important. Each disease is very important. But from an efficacy point of view, if you really want to have a successful project which makes a breakthrough, I think we should also aim to look at in which disease is there the unmet medical need where one of the ATMP therapies would really make the difference, and try to focus on that one in all its aspects, because at the end of the day, it will avoid, let's say, dispersion over hundreds of topics and really try to aim to make a real breakthrough. What it is, I don't know, but that's what I would see it when I hear all this.
Okay. Thank you. So we are getting to the end of our session, and just wanted to let you know what's next. So I think we have taken some notes, right? So we had multiple people here who are taking notes about what we have discussed about. There's a debate, between on the manufacturing, centralized, non-centralized. We will go for the pros and cons, and we will invite people. So all of that will materialize in projects. So we can guarantee you that on the IMI project list for next year, ATMP or advanced therapy is priority number 1 for next year. So we should have some projects. But we are not going to have projects for having projects. So we need to really make a difference here. And we heard some examples beyond the manufacturing, some organoids, and standardization of assays. All of those are okay. We could bundle them into one area. We would also have to rank them into the priority. So what is going to really make a difference for the long term and sustainability is what we have to talk about. It was interesting. We heard some proposals, on prime-like approach or award early reimbursement. We have the adaptive pathway, which most of the programs going to adaptive pathways now are ATMPs, as far as I can see. So there are some tools. I don't know who mentioned, but somebody from maybe the NICE or mentioned maybe the current legal framework and the legislation and everything is sufficient to enable the ATMPs. We do not need to change much. It's just to go for some pilots and to do it. Let's do something and take some products. I like the example, take some examples, but I don't think it's going to be one. We cannot, it's too risky in this area. Maybe multiple examples and pilot them and get the reward, in this pilot. So we could integrate all of that and make a proposal. Hopefully for 2017, you will see those projects, and so you will, if you are here, it's because you are interested. So you will hopefully be involved in those. Okay, so I'd like to thank you for joining this morning for that panel session. And again, thanks for the panelists for joining me for this great, very interesting session. Thank you, everyone.